Senator Sheldon Whitehouse just exposed how deep Trump's influence runs in America's courts. A judicial nominee tied to the effort to overturn the 2020 election faces the truth under fire.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Let me follow up on Senator Tillis's questions, Mr. Geiser. On this committee, I lived through the OLC torture opinions, which were so bad that the administration that wrote them had to withdraw them. The warrantless wiretapping opinions, which were so bad that they created a mutiny within the Department of Justice, and with the walkback of OLC from enforcing the so-called Reagan memo, which posits that the department and OLC in particular will be a somewhat neutral arbiter in conflicts between the executive and the legislative branch over oversight. In all of those matters, the OLC became the active, as Senator Tillis said, the active partisan for the administration and not a neutral decider. If I look at your record, first, how long have you been a lawyer?
Thank you very much, Senator Whitehouse. I've been a lawyer for 10 years.
And how many of those were you a law clerk?
I was a law clerk for 3 different jurists, about a total of 28 months.
And how many of those years were spent in private practice?
I was in private practice, Senator, for about 4 years.
At the associate level?
I was an associate, yes, sir.
How long have you served as Ohio Solicitor General?
I've served since November of 2023 and currently serve as Ohio Solicitor General.
Have you ever tried a case to a final judgment?
Well, thank you very much for that question, Senator. I have worked on trial litigation teams. I have not myself been personally the counsel of record in a trial case. I am primarily an appellate lawyer and an advisor and counselor.
Have you ever personally appeared in trial court?
Yes, Senator.
Now, some time ago, you had pretty strong views about President Trump. You said that, quote, his political positions are a lot like his hair, pasted on for effect and flopping whichever way the wind blows. That he has an astonishing weakness for flattery, falling for Vladimir Putin after a few coquettish bats of the eyelashes from the Russian thug, and that he is a short-fingered vulgarian candidate. Since then, have you had a role in Donald Trump's litigation that tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. Like millions of Americans, I've seen the courage and the results that President Trump has delivered. I watched in that field in Pennsylvania as he stood after the assassin's bullet, and I hope my children look up to and live up to that kind of courage in their life.
So while in private practice, did you have a role in Donald Trump's litigation that tried to overturn the results of the 2020 election?
Well, thank you for that question, Senator. I was retained by Donald J. Trump for President Incorporated in the 2020 campaign to provide legal advice, which I did.
The former White House press secretary testified that you were one of her go-to people to advance the argument that Vice President Pence could overturn the 2020 election. Is that true?
Well, Senator, as you know, ethical obligations of confidentiality attach to any client matter. And as a former attorney for a former client, I am not going to divulge the confidential communications that I made to that client.
Just if I look at this, you don't seem to have the legal experience that most OLC chiefs have. You seem to have done a very abrupt pivot politically into the Trump camp and into election denialism. On what basis should I have any confidence that you will exert any independence or judgment within OLC if the Trump administration comes knocking on your door for an opinion and won't go down the road of we'll give you your free torture opinion, we'll give you your free warrantless wiretap opinion, and we won't bother to enforce the Reagan memo any longer? What will keep you from going down those bad roads that we've seen OLC go down?
Well, thank you, Senator Whitehouse. The first role of any lawyer is to be able to state the law as it is. And the Office of Legal Counsel serves an important role in our administration by providing a neutral opinion objectively of what the law is.
Will you do that?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, Mr. Woodward, last question. I'll re-ask Ranking Member Durbin's question a slightly different way. Under what circumstances would you recommend that the Trump administration defy a lower court order?
Mr. Chairman, I see my time has expired. May I answer the question? Please, you should answer, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Whitehouse, I can't imagine a circumstance in which I would be called upon to advise the defiance of a court order. I've had the great privilege of working with President Trump now for many years, and I just don't ever imagine a circumstance in which I would be called upon to give advice of that nature.
Today's hearing wasn't just another routine confirmation session. It was a moment of reckoning for the American justice system. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, known for his sharp intellect and meticulous command of history, didn't just question a nominee. He dissected a pattern that threatens the independence of our judiciary and the very idea of accountability in government. Whitehouse began with a history lesson, and for good reason. He recalled the torture memos and the warrantless wiretapping opinions from the Bush era, documents so extreme, so divorced from legal integrity that they had to be withdrawn. Those moments in history weren't just bureaucratic missteps, they were moral failures, where lawyers in the Office of Legal Counsel, OLC, used their pens not to defend the law, but to justify abuse of power. That reminder matters because the nominee before him, a relatively inexperienced lawyer named Mr. Geiser, comes from that same dangerous mold, someone whose career and convictions appear more political than principled. Whitehouse wanted the public to see that. He wanted the record to reflect that this nominee's short legal resume, 10 years in total, less than 5 in practice, and no trial experience to speak of, pales in comparison to the gravity of the position he's being considered for. The Office of Legal Counsel is no ordinary branch of government. It's the conscience of the executive branch, the legal compass meant to tell a president what he can and cannot do under the Constitution. It was designed to be neutral, grounded, and immune to politics. When OLC fails, democracy trembles because it's the last line between lawful governance and presidential overreach. And that's exactly why Whitehouse's questioning was so urgent, because here was a nominee with a troubling record of loyalty, not to the law, but to Donald Trump. Whitehouse reminded the room that this nominee once criticized Trump in scathing terms, calling him, quote, a short-fingered vulgarian, and mocking his sycophantic admiration for Vladimir Putin. Those were the words of a man who once saw Trump clearly. But somewhere along the way, that changed. After Trump rose to power, this same man found himself working for Trump's campaign, providing legal advice after the 2020 election, the very moment when Trump and his allies launched one of the most dangerous assaults on democracy in modern history. Millions of Americans watched that unfold. We remember the lawsuits, the conspiracy theories, the baseless claims of fraud, all part of an orchestrated attempt to deny the will of the people. And now, one of the lawyers involved in that effort sits before the Senate, asking to be trusted with interpreting the law for a possible future Trump administration. That's not just alarming, it's disqualifying. When Whitehouse pressed him on his role in those efforts, on whether he personally advanced the argument that Vice President Pence could overturn the election, the nominee dodged. He hid behind attorney-client confidentiality. But as Whitehouse and the public know, this isn't just about private advice to a client. It's about participation in a historic act of deception, one that nearly ended the peaceful transfer of power. What makes this moment even more disturbing is the nominee's sudden political transformation. He once saw Trump as a threat to democratic norms. Now, he describes him as a model of courage, even invoking the image of Trump standing on that field in Pennsylvania after the assassin's bullet. That's not just political flattery, that's hero worship. And it's exactly what Whitehouse warned against, a justice system staffed not by independent legal minds, but by political loyalists willing to bend the law to serve one man. Whitehouse's questions were not abstract. He asked the nominee directly, if a future Trump administration came to you asking for legal cover to ignore Congress, to defy the courts, or to push through unconstitutional orders, what would you do? Would you uphold the law, or would you justify the abuse of power? The nominee gave the kind of answer that sounds good on paper. The first role of any lawyer is to state the law as it is. But that statement, while polished, is hollow, because the real test isn't whether a lawyer knows the law, it's whether they have the courage to tell a powerful president no. That's what this hearing was really about, the courage to say no. Whitehouse has seen what happens when lawyers don't. The torture memos, the surveillance abuses, the erosion of oversight. Each time, the justification was the same. We're just interpreting the law. But behind those words was a betrayal of the rule of law itself.